5, yay. Okay, we'll get started in a couple of minutes. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. One more minute and we'll get started. Hi, Matt. Hi, Chris. Oh, my cousin Mindy's here. Yay. Okay. All right. Good evening. All right. It's 8 o'clock. I like to reward the people who arrive on time, and actually I like to not punish the people who arrive on time by rewarding those who come late. So let's start on time. All right, we are on page 166 in the blue Art Scroll Chumash. We are at the end of, we're hopefully tonight going to finish our study of Parshat Vayeitzei. And that's exciting because then next time we'll start on a new Parsha. So we're on chapter 31, verse 40 in Vayeitzei. Now we should have to do a little bit of housekeeping first. We finished last week with verse 32. So we're going to read up a little bit and then we'll talk. We'll get started with verse 40. So starting with verse 33 on the previous page. So Lavan came into Yaakov's tent. A little background here. Remember, Yaakov and his daughters were fleeing from Lavan, Yaakov's father-in-law, going back to Eretz Yisrael after 20 years in Haran, where Yaakov lived for a while and married his wives and had most of his children. And he was now, God told him to go back to Israel, and that was what he was doing now. And he left sort of under cover of darkness, partly because he was afraid of his father-in-law and what his father-in-law might decide to do in terms of either killing him or detaining him or what have you. So he's leaving, and Lavan finds out, and he chases him down, and he's not too pleased about this. So Lavan came into Yaakov's tent. Oh, now he's looking for, a little more background. He's looking for his teraphim. The teraphim are these little idols that Lavan used to worship, because he was an idol worshiper. And Rachel, Yaakov's wife and Lavan's daughter, had taken them, and the Medrash says that she took them because she wanted her father to not be an idol worshiper anymore, because she knew this was the wrong thing, and she wanted to do something good for him, and she thought taking his teraphim would be good, and so that's what she did. So now Lavan is hunting for them, and Yaakov had said previously, we didn't take them, and anyone who took them, Yaakov said, he shall not live. And this, we'll get back to that in a few weeks, but this turns out to be not a good thing that Yaakov says. So Lavan came into Yaakov's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two maidservants, and he found nothing. When he had left Leah's tent, he came into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the teraphim, which we talked about earlier, put them into the camel's pack saddle, and sat on them. Lavan, so she's hiding them in plain sight by sitting on them, right? So Lavan rummaged through the whole tent, but found nothing. She said to her father, "Let my lord not find it annoying that I cannot rise up before you, for the way of women is upon me." So it's a standard sign of respect that we stand up for a person who is our elder or who is our teacher or our parent. I guess a parent is an elder. We stand up for them when they come in the room as a sign of respect, and this is actually that's a very proper thing to do. And so now there are some exceptions to it, like if you're actually studying Torah at the time that even a great rabbi comes in a room. If you're studying Torah at that time and you're not taking any break from it, even a momentary break, then you don't stand up, because you're engaged in studying Torah. And even one of the great sage of the generation would say, you're studying Torah. God's word is more important than mine. You should sit down and continue learning. Don't interrupt your learning. So, but she's sitting on the pack saddle where the teraphim are hidden, and she says, and she tells him a story, right? That the way of women is upon me. So she makes an excuse that she's not standing up for her father. Thus he searched and he did not find the teraphim. Verse 36, then Yaakov became angered. He took up his grievance with Lavan. Yaakov spoke up and said to Lavan, what is my transgression? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? That when you rummaged through all my things, what did you find of your household objects? Set it here before my kinsmen and your kinsmen, and let them decide between the two of us. Yaakov is really PO'd at Lavan. He's had it up to here with him. You know, that he's done with him. All these years of what he's been doing. And now he starts listing his grievances. Verse 38. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your she-goats never miscarried, nor did I eat rams of your flock. That which was mangled I never brought you. I myself would bear the loss. Meaning, if something got hurt on his watch, he would not. He would pay for it himself. Or stolen on his watch, he would pay for it himself. I would bear the loss. From me you would extract it, whether it was stolen by day or stolen by night. Verse 40. This is how I was. By day scorching heat consumed me, and frost by night. My sleep drifted from my eyes. This is my 20 years in your household. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flocks. And you changed my wage 100 times. Had not the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the dread of Yitzchak been with me, you would have surely by now sent me away empty-handed. God saw my wretchedness and the toil of my hands, so he admonished you last night. Earlier, Lavan had said, that it's in my power to hurt you, but your God came to me in a dream last night and told me not to. So he was obviously threatening him. Okay, so, all right, so from Rabbi Shlomo Katz, regarding the 20 years that Lavan spent in the service of, that Yaakov spent in the service of Lavan, right, which he described, which we just described. So what would you do if you had 20 years of sitting in a field watching sheep and goats? What would you do with your time? Right? Time is something that is a precious gift we have. We don't know how much we have, and we can never get it back once it's gone. Right? So we're supposed to use and God actually, one of the things that we have to answer for when we get to heaven after 120 years, please God, is how do we use our time? Do we use our time wisely, or do we waste it on stupid things? The Medrash says that Yaakov spent his time reciting Tehillim, reciting Psalms. And specifically, the 15 chapters of Tehillim that begin Shir Hamalos, one of which we say at the beginning of benching, at the beginning of Grace After Meals on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay, and these psalms that it says that Yaakov recited include verses like, "Let Yisrael declare it now. Had not Hashem been with us when men rose up against us, then they would have swallowed us alive. And from the depths I called to you." Right? Very graphic images about being downtrodden, about a low place in life. Another sage in the Midrash says that Yaakov recited all of Tehillim, not just 15 chapters, but all 150. Right? And specifically, he cites in chapter 24, verses 4 through 7, where it says, "You are the Holy One enthroned upon all the praises of Israel. In you our fathers trusted. To you they cried out, but I am a worm and not a man." Okay? Now, in each of these cases that are mentioned in the Midrash, it uses the name Yisrael. And the Midrash says that in all those cases, Yisrael is referring to Yaakov, right? We know that that's the name that he gets later. So Rabbi Avraham Yafen, who lived 1887 and 1970, he was the Rosh Hashiva of Novardok. Novardok. Okay. Whatever you say. Okay. He said each of these selections that's cited includes an expression of deep, deep humility. Right? From the depths I called. From the depths. I am a worm. Right? How could a great man like Yaakov, who says Tehillim under the worst of conditions, he's freezing at night, he's burning up during the day, he's being taken advantage of, he's got nothing to do except to sit and watch these sheep. Right? Under the worst conditions, for 20 years he's saying Tehillim, he's saying Psalms. It takes real greatness to spend his time in a productive way like that instead of doing something that would be a waste of time or something counterproductive. Right? Like trolling on Facebook. Right? And why is he doing all these great things? Because he knows that he's building the Jewish people as he's doing it with all of his actions. How could someone like him achieve that level of humility? He's a great, great man. How could he achieve such an incredible level of humility? So Rav Yafen says, this is the secret behind what it means to be an Eved Hashem. An Eved is a servant. It's frequently mistranslated as slave, but it really means servant. Right? An Eved Hashem, a servant of God. Human beings, mankind, we are the ladder that's placed on the ground with its top reaching towards the heavens. Right? Like it says, when it talks about Jacob's ladder, right? Yaakov's dream at the beginning of this Parsha, actually. Right? It says that the ladder was on the ground, it was extending to the heavens, toward the heavens. So a ladder, imagine a ladder where the bottom 4 rungs are missing. The bottom 4 rungs of the ladder are missing. How useful is that ladder? Don't all answer at once. How useful is that ladder? Not very useful, right? So a ladder is not complete and not very useful if its lower rungs are missing, right? Some ladders you can just turn over, but let's say it's a ladder you're not turning over, right? It's not very useful. In fact, it's completely useless, really, unless you have a step stool off of the ladder, which would be silly. Right? The same is true for a person. No matter what heights we reach, no matter what heights we're capable of reaching, right? We cannot lose sight of the basics. If we think our spiritual accomplishments put us above working on the little things that make us better people, we are sorely mistaken. Right? We can never forget the little things. In the first chapter of a great book called Mesilas Yesharim, which I learned with Rabbi Bars sometimes, it begins the foundation of Chassidus, or Chassidut, if you prefer, which is translated usually as piety, which is tremendous level of accomplishment and spiritual accomplishment. The foundation of piety and the root of complete divine service lies in clarifying and verifying what is man's duty in the world. Okay? What is man's duty in the world? Rabbi Yafen says piety is one of the highest levels we can achieve. Conversely, knowing our duty in this world doesn't sound so lofty, doesn't sound so high flying, right? It seems basic. What's my duty in the duty sounds, I'm not being childish here, D-U-T-Y, right? It sounds like a basic thing, right? A basic obligation, right? I have a duty to my family to provide food and shelter and clothing, right? That's basics. It's not high, that's not lofty. So, but the Mesilas Yesharim puts together piety and basic and duty knowing our duty in the world, right? What seems like the basic and the high and the lofty. That's the point. If we're so busy striving for the lofty, that we end up forgetting the basics, then it's like a ladder that's missing the bottom 3 rungs. Right? And a ladder that's missing the bottom 3 rungs doesn't let you get up very high because you can't even get started. This explains Yaakov's attitude and his behavior. Right? Precisely because Yaakov was busy with the lofty task of building the Jewish people under adverse conditions, he was able to keep his focus on the basic obligations that he had in life and his own personal insignificance, that is, his total dependence on God. Right? He didn't get all full of himself because he remained focused on his basic duty in the world, his basic obligations in the world. Just as Yaakov said to Hillel in this way, said the Psalms of David, all prayer is best when it's said with the feeling of reaching for a lofty, deep connection with God, while at the same time recognizing our own personal insignificance, unworthiness, if you will, and dependence on Him. When we combine those two things, then we can really achieve something special. Okay? Questions? Comments? Questions or comments out there in Facebook or YouTube land? All right. So we'll go forward. So we read up through verse 42. Okay, so this is from Rabbi Yaakov Menken. So what we just read from Yaakov is a pretty passionate speech about how mistreated he was in all of his time with Lavan, with his father-in-law. And really, you could say it would be hard to not have pity on Yaakov. Courtney, what's your question? I'll see. What are we? What are we combining? We're combining the feeling of reaching, striving, grabbing for, trying to attain a lofty, deep connection with God. This is in our prayers and our avoda, all of our service of God. Combine that with with a recognition of our own personal insignificance and unworthiness, if you will, and our dependence on God, our 100% dependence on God. You combine that lofty, striving, reaching with the recognition of our own insignificance, and that's humility combined with striving for connection to God, and that's when you can achieve real greatness. That's the idea. I hope that answered your question. Okay, so back to the pity party here for Yaakov. This is from our Yaakov Menken. So it'd be hard not to pity him, right? He was forced to flee from his home in fear of his life. His own brother was the one chasing him, right? He arrived dirt poor at the home of his soon-to-be father-in-law, right? Yet Lavan welcomes him seemingly warmly until he finds out that Yaakov has no gifts for him. Why did Lavan welcome him warmly? Because he remembers when Eliezer came to visit. And Eliezer came and he picked out Rivka, Lavan's sister, as a wife for Yitzchak. Right? And he brought all kinds of gold and silver and animals and other trinkets and what have you. So Lavan is thinking, oh, he should have just as much, if not more, right? He's the son of Yitzchak. Not even the servant. The servant of Abraham had that. Imagine what the son of Yitzchak's going to have. So as soon as Lavan finds out that he's got nothing, he puts him right to work, sends him out to the field to work. He works 7 years to marry Rachel in a time when the custom was that the father of the bride would give a dowry. And instead of a dowry, Lavan requires Yaakov to work for him 7 years in order to marry his daughter. So there's no dowry. It's the opposite. Then he tricks him into marrying the wrong sister, right? And then he has to work 7 more years to pay off marrying Rachel. And then he can finally work for himself. The last 6 years, he can work for his own family, to provide for his family, to have money to put into his 401k, right? And then what does Lavan do? Lavan gives him ill and barren sheep, according to Rashi, so they can't even reproduce. And then Lavan keeps changing Yaakov's wages over and over again. And Yaakov complains, you changed my wages 100 times, right? So all these things that Yaakov goes through, it'd be hard not to have pity on him, right? He went through a lot. So in the end it says, God saw my wretchedness and the toil of my hands. So he admonished you last night, speaking to Lavan. Why does it say the toil of my hands? Right? What is that? He saw the toil of my hands, and then God helps him from there. He sees the toil of Yaakov's hands, and then he helps him. And that's why he intercedes with Lavan. So why was it necessary for Yaakov to mention the toil of his hands? What's the point of that? So the reason that Rabbi Menken gives here is that this is Yaakov is saying that because he's asserting to Lavan, I was honest throughout this entire period. I never cheated you. And he's saying to Lavan, you should know, I never gave up. I never gave up. Yaakov is saying, I did everything I possibly could. I did everything I possibly could out of my hands. God determines the outcomes. I did what I could. Chazal, our sages, say that Yaakov established the Mariv prayer. We pray 3 times a day. Morning is Shacharit, afternoon is Mincha, and evening is Mariv. Right? Mariv is said when it's dark. Right? What do we know? What darkness is a scary time, right? It's easy. People who have certain disorders that are related to light can get depressed in the winter because there's not as much light, right? It gets dark early and they can get depressed from that. It's called seasonal affective disorder. Just being in the dark can be scary and challenging. It's a time of giving up, if you will. That it's an opportunity to give up. Yaakov's Mari was associated with never giving up, right? You do all you can, and then you pray. That's the Yaakov outlook. You do all you can, and then you pray. We're going to see in the next parsha how that comes into play, actually. So Rabbi Asher Z. Rubenstein, or Rubenstein, if you will, of Yerushalayim, told a story. He was younger. He was learning in the Panovich Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. Panovich is one of the elite yeshivas in Israel. Used to be in Panovich in Lithuania, probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he had a close friend who was a dedicated and very close student of the mashgiach of the yeshiva. The mashgiach is not the Rosh Yeshiva, but the mashgiach is the spiritual director of the yeshiva. He's maybe closer to each of the boys, and he really sort of navigates the learning channels for the boys and gets to know them more individually, maybe. And but a very high level position and a great person. And Rav Rubenstein, when he was young, he served as the shomer when this close friend, this close student of the Mashgiach, this close friend when he was getting married. So he witnessed this story firsthand. So the wedding was taking place on a Thursday night in Israel, in Bnei Brak, right? Wednesday night was the weekly shmooze by the Mashgiach. Now the shmooze was something you did not miss, okay? It's a class, it's called a shmooze. We say shmoozing, right? But really the shmooze in Yiddish, in a yeshiva, the shmooze is a weekly Jewish ethics class that the mashgiach would give. And it was a very inspiring and very serious thing. And it was something not to be missed. This student did not want to miss the shmooze. But the problem was his mother was flying in, and her flight was arriving at the same time as the shmooze, and he was not going to be able to meet her at the airport. Or he was either going to have to meet her at the airport and miss the class, or not meet his mother at the airport and be at the class. So the mashgiach told him, Kibud Aim, honor your mother, which was in the Ten Commandments, we just had this past Shabbat, takes precedence over being in my class. Not a surprise that he would say that, right? You would guess that one, right? I think anybody would, people with a little bit of seichel, a little bit of common sense would guess that gratitude to your own parents, one of the Ten Commandments, comes before being in this class, right? So the time for the class arrives on a Wednesday night, the night before the wedding, And who's there in the class but this chassan, this groom? He's there. He's sitting in the front row smiling. So, of course, the mashgiach says, what are you doing here? What's going on? And with that big smile on his face, he knew there was something. He chopped that there was something going on. He said, what's going on? So the chassan said to him, he said, I've always come to your shmooze every week. I didn't want to miss. I wanted to come to this week as well. So I did all that I could, and then I prayed. Okay? So what happened? What's the story here? So this story took place in the early days of El Al Airlines, and it was not uncommon for a flight to arrive 4 hours late. Just first of all, it's Israel. They're on Israel time. But then also, things happen. 4 hours late was not so unusual. But the chassan had called the airline. In those days, you couldn't just look it up online because there was no internet. And he was told that this plane was arriving 2 hours early. 2 hours early. It's unheard of. But 2 hours early would allow enough time for his mother to get through customs and for him to bring her back to Bnei Brak, drop her off at where she was staying, and still make it to the shmooze on time. And that's what he did. To where his mother was staying, she told him what the pilot said during the flight. He got on the intercom during the flight and told the passengers, we're going to arrive 2 hours early. In all my years of flying, I've never experienced such a strong tailwind. The whole flight, we have a tailwind, it's unbelievable tailwind, and we're going to arrive 2 hours early. You never give up. You do all you can, and then you pray. Right? There you go. All right. Questions or comments? All right. Anybody out there? Questions or comments? Okay, we'll move forward. Okay, verse 43. Then Lavan spoke up. Now he's going to give his retort, right? After Yaakov's speech about how poorly he's been treated. Lavan spoke up and said to Yaakov, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flock is my flock, and all that you see is mine. Your daughters